Welcome, and thank you for joining me on another quiet journey into the slower corners of history. Tonight, we travel far back in time, to the sun-baked riverbanks of the ancient Nile, where towering monuments cast long shadows across the sand, and daily life moved to the steady rhythm of flood and harvest. This is not a story of pharaohs in golden masks, or of gods and curses and glittering tombs. No, this is a softer story, a slower story, one about the thousands of ordinary people who lived and labored under that vast desert sky, who watched the sun rise over the same fields, year after year, who built the greatness of Egypt not with magic, but with calloused hands, worn sandals, and quiet persistence. You're about to step into their world not as a ruler or priest, but as someone truly ordinary, perhaps a farmer, perhaps a servant, perhaps a pyramid builder. In this four-part journey, we'll begin with the harsh daily reality of working on one of the ancient world's most ambitious projects, the construction of the pyramids. From there, we'll travel into the strange and lonely life of one revolutionary pharaoh whose ideas reshaped Egypt in ways that baffled even his own people. Then we'll unearth the quiet mystery of an unmarked tomb, a puzzle still whispered about by archaeologists today. And finally, we'll drift into the golden halls of royalty to observe how the privileged few lived in contrast to the millions below them. Let your thoughts settle, let the present fade, and prepare to slip quietly into the rhythms of ancient Egypt. Imagine the first sting of desert wind in your face, before the sun has even begun to rise. Your linen tunic is coarse against your skin. The air is cool now, but it won't be for long. Soon, the stones under your feet will burn. You are standing in the shadow of something immense. Not quite a pyramid yet, but a sloped skeleton of pale limestone blocks, reaching steadily, and you are one of the thousands tasked with making it rise. It's not quite what you might imagine. You are not a slave, not in chains. In fact, you were selected, perhaps even honored. You are a laborer, part of a rotating crew, called from your village for a set number of months. Each year, you live in a nearby workers' village well ordered, with clay brick houses and shared bakeries. You sleep on a mat, your head resting near others in your group. Privacy is rare, but so is silence. The day begins early. Before the light fully warms the desert, you gather with others at the worksite. Teams are organized: hauling crews, stonemasons, tool sharpeners, water carriers. There is structure, there is rhythm, but there is also pain. Your task is simple, yet grueling. Along with dozens of others, you help maneuver a limestone blockage, weighing as much as a car along a packed earth ramp. The tools are simple: ropes, levers, wooden sledges, no wheels, no engines, just bodies, voices, and dust. Your hands are thick with calluses. Your shoulders ache constantly, but you are fed. That matters. Meals are basic: bread, sometimes onions or dried fish, and beer, thick, cloudy, and nourishing. You drink it not for pleasure, but because it's safer than the water. It fills your stomach when the food does not. The sun climbs higher, the heat grows intense. You wrap your head in a linen scarf, but the sweat pours anyway. There's no shelter, only short breaks beneath rough tents of palm fiber. You press your back against warm stone and close your eyes, if only for a moment. Sometimes accidents happen. Stones slip, ropes snap, a cry rings out, then silence. The overseers do not shout. They note the incident. The work resumes. Despite the hardship, there is a kind of pride. You are building something eternal. Your name may be forgotten, but the monument will remain. Or so you were told. At dusk, when your muscles are heavy and your mouth dry, you return to the workers' village. There are small comforts. A song passed between friends. A game of sanote scratched into the dirt. A cool breeze at last, drifting through the narrow alley between homes. You sleep on your side, curled into the silence. Tomorrow, it will begin again. This was not a life of slavery, but it was far from easy. The rhythm was relentless, the work unending, and the reward, perhaps only the hope that your children would inherit a better field to till, or avoid the work gangs entirely. So, when you next gaze at the great pyramids rising from the desert, remember the lives poured into each stone. Not just kings, but countless ordinary people, each with sore feet, quiet dreams, and no place in the history books. Now let the sun rise again. But this time it shines not on dusty laborers or stone ramps, but on wide open plazas, carved columns, and a city that, like its creator, was unlike any other. This is Amarna, and at its heart, a man once called the heretic king. Akhenaten, before he became pharaoh, he was known as Amenhotep IV, son of Amenhotep III, husband of the famous Queen Nefertiti, and heir to the traditions of 1,000 years. But he would break almost every one of them. When he came to power, Egypt's gods were many. Temples to Amun, Mut, and Osiris stood grand across the land, thick with incense and tribute. Priests wielded great power economically, spiritually, and politically. The divine order was well established. But Ak was different. He truly believed, that there was only one God worthy of worship. Aton, the radiant disk of the sun. Imagine the stillness of a courtyard in no statues of Horus, no chants to Isis, only the golden light and the silence of something unfamiliar. Akhenaten declared Aton the sole deity. He closed temples, he redirected funds, he changed the art, the prayers, the very names of his people. Even his own name Akhenaten meant effective for the Aton. It was not just a religious shift, it was a transformation of the entire state. He moved the capital to Amarna city, built from scratch in the middle of the desert. Here, he would be both king and prophet. Here, everything would be different. Art changed dramatically. Gone were the rigid, idealized forms of traditional Egyptian depictions. In their place, soft, elongated faces, curved bellies, wide hips, family scenes, sun rays with tiny hands, quiet moments of intimacy. Some scholars have called this realism, others strange. Akhenaten and Nefertiti are often shown together playing with their children, receiving the light of the Aten. There is warmth in these carvings and mystery. But with all his sweeping change, Akhenaten was not a strong administrator. The empire, once vast and well managed, began to crack. Outposts were ignored, allies abandoned, letters sent by foreign rulers during this time begging for gold, troops or acknowledgement were found untouched, buried in the sands of Amarna centuries later. And when Akhenaten died, perhaps suddenly, perhaps after illness his revolution unraveled, his son, Tutankhaten, was quickly renamed to the old gods returned. The capital moved back to, and Akhenaten's memory was chiseled out of monuments, his name struck from records, his body buried hastily, buried at all. He was forgotten, until archaeologists in the 19th century uncovered the strange remains of and the scattered fragments of his story. To this day, Akhenaten remains a puzzle. Was he a visionary mystic, ahead of his time? A zealous tyrant who destabilized an empire? A frail man escaping into ideology? Or a blend of all three? We may never know. What we do know is that for 17 years, Egypt bent to the will of a man who worshipped the sun, not as a god cloaked in animal form or temple walls, but as light itself, And when the sun finally set on his reign, it took decades for its shadow to fade. Let us descend now into the Valley of the Kings. The sun softens behind rugged cliffs, the air cools, and the ground beneath your feet carries the memory of countless burials, some celebrated, others forgotten. We step slowly into a tomb known only by a number, KV55. It is not grand, not elegant, not even well finished, but inside this quiet, dusty chamber lies one of the greatest unresolved mysteries in Egyptology. The tomb was discovered in 1907. It had been sealed, but only just. The blocking stones were hurriedly arranged, the plaster patchy, the official seals haphazard. Something about it all felt rushed. Inside, a jumble of relics, a gilded coffin, its face hacked off, canopic jars with the image of a queen, but no organs. Bits of furniture, a shrine bearing the name of Queen Tai, mother of and at the center bones, a single skeleton hastily placed in a decaying coffin, its identity defaced. Who was this person? Theories formed quickly. Some believed it was Akhenaten himself. Others insisted it was Smenkhare, the mysterious co-regent who may or may not have ruled briefly after Still others suggested it could be a prince, perhaps Tutankhamun's brother. The evidence was confusing. The artifacts bore multiple names, many of them scratched out. Royal titles had been altered. Pieces of different people's burial equipment had been shoved together. It was as if someone was trying to both honor and erase a person's legacy at the same time. For decades, the bones lay in museums, debated by scholars, examined by experts. Radiological scans suggested the man was young, no more than his mid-20s when he died. DNA studies later showed a direct paternal link to Tutankhamun. He was likely his father, but the body was in poor shape. The bones fragile, the skull distorted possibly by the extreme conditions of the tomb or the embalming itself. Some researchers argued the person had suffered from genetic disease. Others believed he'd been weakened by years of inbreeding common in royal bloodlines. The truth remained hazy. Even today, debate continues. Was this Akhenaten, buried without ceremony in a reused coffin? Or Smenkhare, whose reign was so brief that no proper tomb was prepared? Or someone else entirely? The mystery deepens when you consider the politics of the time. The successors of Akhenaten, those who restored the old religion, had a vested interest in scrubbing his memory clean. Yet someone still took the effort to bury him, however clumsily. Was it a compromise? A secret act of respect? And what of the shattered shrine of Queen Tai found inside Akhenaten's powerful mother? Was she meant to be entombed here as well? Or was her monument moved here after the destruction of her original burial site? Nothing in KV55 speaks clearly. It whispers, confuses, contradicts, and perhaps that is fitting, because the story of Akhenaten, his rise, his isolation, his legacy, was always one wrapped in uncertainty. KV55 remains closed to the public. Its modest walls still hold secrets, and the man who lies within, silent and nameless, continues to remind us that even in a civilization obsessed with order, legacy, and the afterlife, some things were meant to be lost. Now, let the desert night deepen. Leave behind the workers' camps, the wind-swept tombs, and the sun-drenched temples. We step quietly now into a different world, a world of opulence, of ceremony, of careful illusion. You are entering the palace of Ramses II, known to some as Ramses the Great, a pharaoh whose reign stretched over 6 decades, who built more monuments to himself than any ruler before or after, and who came to be worshipped as a god while still alive. But tonight, we are not here for his glory. We are here for the silence, for the rituals, for the small details behind the spectacle. Imagine walking slowly down a pillared corridor, columns painted with scenes of victory and divine favor. The air is thick with the scent of lotus and incense. Soft, flickering lamps cast long shadows on the polished stone. In this palace, time does not rush. It flows like the Nile, measured, ritualized, deliberate. Everything about Ramses' life was designed to uphold a very specific story, that he was chosen by the gods, loved by the people, and invincible in war. But behind that image lay a man surrounded by structure and burdened by ceremony. He awoke not to birdsong, but to schedule. His first prayers and offerings were performed before sunrise, often with priests and servants in attendance. His garments were chosen carefully, not just for comfort, but for symbolism. The color of his robes, the jewelry he wore, each had meaning. Meals were not spontaneous. They were curated. Bread, honey, roasted meats, wine, all served in ornate bowls, but rarely eaten in excess. Moderation, at least in public, was a virtue expected of a living god. The palace itself was alive with function. Scribes whispered as they copied reports. Foreign envoys waited, sometimes for days, hoping to be granted an audience. Royal children, Ramesses had over 100, were educated in nearby quarters, each being groomed for a different role in court or priesthood. And then there were the queens. Nefertari, the favored wife, had her own grand residence. She was a powerful presence, deeply involved in religious rites. Other wives, concubines, and daughters moved more quietly through the shadows of the palace, each representing potential alliance, lineage, or favor. As the evening approached, the palace did not dim. Instead, musicians played soft melodies on harps and flutes. Dancers moved with precision. Perfumed oils were burned. Rituals were performed. And all the while, Ramses sat Trigel, distant, observing. It is easy to imagine that such a life would be full of comfort. And in many ways, it was. He had the best physicians, the finest food, the richest clothes. But he also bore the weight of divinity. He could not fall ill. He could not be seen to doubt. He could not lose a battle, at least not publicly. Even his most questionable military campaigns, like the Battle of Kadesh, were immortalized as overwhelming victories, regardless of the actual outcome. At night, when the palace finally grew still, one wonders what thoughts lingered in his mind. Did he believe the stories written on his temples? Did he feel truly divine? Or did he ever long for the simplicity of a farmer's hut, the laughter of children not bound by etiquette, a life unmeasured by granite monuments? We will never know. But as the oil lamps flicker low and the desert breeze slips through carved stone windows, one thing is clear. The palace was not just a home, it was a stage. And Ramses II was always performing. And now the sands begin to settle. The torches of the palace fade into night. The whispers of tombs fall silent. And the steady rhythm of life along the Nile soul, far removed from our own slows, once more to a quiet, ancient hush. You've walked through the dust of stone cutters, bent beneath sun and stone in the shadow of the pyramids. You've glimpsed the mind of a pharaoh who dared to reshape his gods, only to be buried in secrecy. You've stood among relics, in the dim heart of a tomb that holds more questions than answers. And you've floated through the cool halls of a royal palace, where power was a performance and silence spoke volumes. This was not the Egypt of myths or movies, not just a land of gold, curses, and mummies. This was a real place, full of repetition, labor, ritual, beauty, and contradiction. The people who lived it rose with the same sun. You know, they feared hunger. They hoped for their children. They laughed when they could. And they, too, sometimes longed for rest. As you settle now into the stillness of your own space, know that time, like the Nile, carries us all forward, that even the greatest empires crumble quietly into sand, that history is not always loud, it often whispers, and sometimes that whisper is enough. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through the lives of the ancient Egyptians. May your sleep be peaceful, your dreams untroubled, and your thoughts as calm as the desert wind beneath a silver moon. Good night.